Hey, and hello everyone. My name is Carl Johnson, and I see we still have people entering our Zoom session for this evening. I'll give 30 seconds and we will start. All right, perfect. So everyone is entered. Like I said, hello everyone. My name is Carl Johnson, and this session is related to ITAR. I'm assuming that if you signed up for the session that you are connected with ITAR, you're a defense contractor, you are a manufacturer of maybe some sort of widget, um, and you are curious or have questions around what is considered the export of software and technical data. Okay, so this is a short session, shouldn't put anyone to sleep, but you should be able to walk away with a good definition and understanding of what exactly is the export of software and technical data. So let's begin. I'm just going to tune up my presentation here for us. Okay. Like I said, my name is Carl Johnson. I'm the president of Cleared Systems. We specialize and focus on information compliance and cybersecurity, specifically to the high regulatory organizations. You can see on your screen, I've written a few books about the ITAR and COI and data breaches and CMMC. This session, we're going to focus strictly on ITAR and the export controls. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please send them in our chats, or you can also send us an email at info@clearedsystems.com, and myself or one of my colleagues will get back to you. Okay, again, quick overview. What is the definition of software and technical data? Understanding export controls, categories of export, and last but not least, the compliance and regulations. Let's first start with the software and technical data defined. And I think this is important because if you look at what the State Department has regarding technical data defined, it's a broader term. So I wanted to narrow it down into 2 points that is relatable to everyone and is a little easier to understand. The first is software. And software, as we know it today, is of course some a piece of data that you install on a computer and it does functions. And like I have in the presentation is some instructions, data, or programs that enable a computer to perform specific tasks or functions. So the question we get a lot of times is that let's say you're a manufacturer and you have developed some software that does specific tasks, and you have a customer that is in another country, and you're trying to understand how can you export that piece of software, or if that software even complies. And if it's even defined or called software, then yes, it is part of ITAR as it relates to dealing with any items that are on the list specific to the State Department. Now, with technical data, it's a little gray area, right? So, as we have our definition, it could be any information. Again, doesn't necessarily have to be blueprints or diagrams, but it could be just even a white paper. Let's say you are a manufacturer and you put out a white paper on how your widget helps build defense systems. Well, and then you have that specific information in your book bag. You leave the country, you go to another country, and you're now sharing that information with someone else or another company in another country. Well, you have now just violated ITAR, export controls. And so I think you need to be very careful with any information that leaves your environment and especially leaves the United States. Specifically, what I advise my customers to do is to make sure that all of your documents are labeled and proper markings. The one thing I see most of the time is that there is no markings on any of the documents, and that's a major no-no. If you look at some of the violations, and especially lately, um, everyone talks about Flare, but there's lots of companies that are being fined millions of dollars and sometimes even criminal cases because they are exporting without knowing, exporting information. But their definition of information is, like I said, maybe CAD, blueprint, or diagrams. No, if any information related to a product, and then you're selling that product or you're making that product that is part of the Department of Defense or weapon systems or any weapon that the United States has deemed as part of ITAR, then yes, you are in direct violation. And you most definitely should seek some consultation, if not us, somewhere. But be very careful. So, first and foremost, export controls, right? So, export controls, the one point that a lot of people ask is that why do we have them and what exactly are they? It's very simple. Export controls is basically around protecting national security, period. So obviously, United States, like many countries, has weapons systems. They work with large prime contractors, let's say Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, all these companies. Well, the technology that goes into those weapon systems, whether we're talking about um, even a hot air balloon that has camera systems on board, all of those systems and specific weapon systems were proprietary to that particular country. And believe it or not, every country has their own set of ITAR controls. Just in the United States, ours is very thorough, and we have a whole list of different controls that every manufacturer, every organization must abide by. Within the within the export controls, the one that we hear about the most, of course, is the State Department. But there is or not every, but a lot of agencies have different ITAR controls that abide to them as well. So that said, don't just think of the State Department, but think export controls could apply to many different agencies abroad. Okay, so categories of export. And like I mentioned a couple slides ago, uh, physical export, and we sometimes don't think about it, but physical export is considered uh, uh, just as vital as electric. Um, so there is a couple situations, and we've had with customers that they had memory sticks or USB sticks, and the USB sticks was in their bag, and of course, for whatever reason, the USB sticks was searched and found out that there was CAD drawings, and they of course got in trouble for that, for one not declaring it and one not being registered. Um, the other part of it is the electronic export. So the export of just your regular software that you may have in the cloud, and maybe you give access to someone in another country to your GCC High cloud, right, or some other cloud that you're storing ITAR information. Well, now you're in direct violation. The next part is it is the any kind of technical data right? That is going to a foreign national within the country. So meaning you're inside the United States, but let's say you're having a meeting with someone from another country. You're meeting for coffee. You're exchanging information about your product because you want to work with them. Well, now you have possibly violated a ITAR. You've possibly made an ITAR violation. Um, any information that you have, again, that's related to your product, so if you're a manufacturer, etc., you have to be very careful of who you share that information with. Export control doesn't always necessarily mean you're outside the United States, but that also means that foreign nationals. So be very careful of who you share that information with, and also I think of where you're storing that information. I can say that I would say about 80% of companies out there that are manufacturers, and that may work with the larger prime contractors, I could say that most of those are currently not storing ITAR information correctly, right? I know because we talk to a lot of them. Most of the time, you're storing the information in a computer or maybe a laptop. Maybe you're a small shop, so you're storing your information in a laptop or computer. That computer is not protected. Um, that computer is connected to the internet. That computer has not been updated. You're not using labels. There's not a firewall. There's no vulnerability scans being done. It's possible that you would be in direct violation, especially if there is a data breach and it's mentioning your product. Which, believe me, hackers are always out there looking for vulnerabilities. So just remember that is that just because you think that your information is secure, it's really not. Have a third party come in and assess your environment, especially you're dealing with ITAR, or if you're dealing with COI, anything like that. It's so important to not risk it and have a third party review your environment. So compliance and regulations, kind of spoke about this and over again. So with your compliance and regulations, again, we're talking about ITAR, making sure that if you are exporting defense articles, any types of services, any type of technical data, again, going back to what I mentioned before, white papers, well, that's considered technical data. Be very careful. Don't even even in some cases brochures. So you're selling a product to someone in another country. You have this beautiful brochure, but now it discloses a lot of information, maybe about a missile system, etc., that your product helps and helps manufacture. Well, now you possibly could be have in direct violation of ITAR. So just keep that in mind. So it's not also just about military use. It could be civilian applications as well. You want to check the list to make sure that your product, one, is registered, and two, don't just focus on military usage, but also look and make sure that there's no civilian applications that could put you on a violation of ITAR as well. So some ways of ensuring compliance, I mentioned before, first and foremost is just knowing where your cyber hygiene stands. All too many times I hear people say, well, we know that our environment is secure because it's only on one computer, or we keep it on our file network system, so we know all our information is secure. Uh, that that will get you into a lot of trouble. You most definitely want a third-party assessor to come in and look and ensure that your systems are secure, make sure they're updated. Also, most important is to keep updated with all ITAR controls and requirements. They do change. They don't change regularly, but they do change. Um, And the biggest part to it is implementing controls, like such as ACL, right? Rules and responsibility. I mean, roles and responsibility, logging, who has access to what. That doesn't necessarily mean all just the digital side of the house, but also physical side. Who has access to your building? What can they access? Who are you allowed to access? Are you keeping logs of that access? The biggest part too is training your employees. All too many times I see companies that they only train the employees that are touching ITAR or CUI. All employees of your organization should be trained, even if it's just a quarterly training. All employees must be trained, because even though most of your employees may not be dealing with ITAR, that employee might have access. Let's say a global administrator might have access to your ITAR information or CUI, and for whatever reason um, that person is breached or allows access to your environment. Now you're exposed. So it's important that everyone receives training on export controls and their regulations. And that concludes our ITAR session for this evening. If you have any questions whatsoever, please contact us. Again, my name is Carl Johnson. We're more than happy to help.